Hey up, people. Welcome to the Wordwise podcast with your host, Jamie Frasivulu. I'm sat here in the Seven Stars pub with my producer, Blake.
Hey
Say
up.
hello, Blake.
How are we? Hello.
I'm all right. How are you? All good, yeah?
Yeah, not bad, mate. Not bad. How are you?
Yeah, good. So the idea of the podcast is basically to give a bit of an insight into how one might make a living as a poet and creative in general, particularly being a working class scallywag.
Yeah.
And hopefully I'll be able to share some tips with the listeners over the period of time of the podcast. I'll also be shedding light from the next episode onwards on a Midlands-based poet. So I'm going to speak to a Midlands-based poet and be speaking to them for sort of 5 minutes every episode. There'll be an emphasis on speaking to publishers, and so that gives the listeners an idea of how publishing works, how they might go about getting published, what publishers are looking for, etc. In this episode, we're going to be speaking to Paul Hanley from Bearded Badger Press, which is a Derby-based press, which I'm really happy about and really excited to be speaking to him because, you know, it's been way too long since Derby had any kind of press of any sort. I'm really excited about that. I'll also be doing what I'm going to call the Dead Poets Corner every month, where I'll be reading out a poem from a dead poet. Does what it says on the tin, but just to kind of like share the work of those that are no longer with us and keep that living, because that to me is really important, that, you know, we keep the spirit of poetry alive. And we're not just going to be strictly covering poetry, it's basically going to be anything to do with words. So I'm really interested in anybody that makes a living through words in any way. And that's sort of the basis of what the podcast will be. I've got some really exciting guests lined up. And I'll also be doing a bit of an on-the-road kind of, I suppose, call it. What do you call it?
Like a diary.
Like a diary, yeah, so that's it. Who knows that I couldn't find the word diary, but, you know, sometimes it's hard to find these words.
I think that'll be a real good way of getting an insight into how a working class lad makes a living out on the road most of the time, aren't you? Making your money and making your living through the spoken word. So I think that's a real interesting way of kind of seeing how you do that. Yeah,
I'll be talking about the projects that I run, the education work I do, the gigs I do, and just you'd probably be quite surprised some of the stuff you end up doing when you're sort of a full-time poet. It's you sort of do this and that and whatever's necessary. I'll also be talking about creative projects I'm up to, so I may as well start there. So
you started by saying about how a working class scallywag kind of gets into making the living from being a poet and a spoken word artist. I don't know if you like that expression or not, spoken word artist, but it covers everything you do, not just poetry, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But how do you get started in, for people that don't know that are listening?
Well, obviously, maybe not obviously, but I ended up getting in a lot of trouble. I was always in quite a lot of trouble as a younger person. And one day I just decided I wanted to change that narrative, and I didn't really know what to do, but I had a feeling it might start with going to uni, of all places. So I decided to go to uni, and I ended up on a degree in American Studies and Creative Writing. And on the creative writing side of the degree, I was lucky enough to be tutored by a poet called Matthew Clegg. This was at Derby Uni. So obviously I love Derby, so there'll be plenty of Derby in this podcast as well. And he saw something in my poetry and kind of gave me encouragement and almost a license to do it. And, you know, I had this idea that I was going to be the next Irving Welsh and everything I was going to write was going to be a novel. And he kind of helped me recognise that not all ideas are a novel. You know, some ideas might be poems, some ideas might be short stories, scripts, or, you know, whatever it might be. And, you know, I was kind of taken back with this idea when because I told him about my process in terms of writing, and he was like, "Oh, have you ever thought you might be a poet?" And I was kind of like really uncomfortable with that term. It just didn't really sit as being something that I could do. But then if I sort of look back, even during the scallywag years, I had this creative side to me. I used to sing and shout in punk bands. I first got on a stage at the age of 14, screaming and shouting at the Victoria Inn near the train station. I was lucky enough to support Snow Patrol a couple of times.
Wow.
You know, done some pretty cool stuff. I supported them 6 weeks before they had a #1 single.
Really? So you've always had that creative side. It was just channeling it in the right way, kind of thing.
Yeah, and I suppose it was making the link as well. So when you know, I was comfortable with the idea of being a lyricist, but I didn't equate that to having anything to do with poetry or feel that I had any authority to do poetry. So I suppose going to Derby was the catalyst to give it a crack, I suppose. And yeah, I'm here 12 years later after doing my first ever. Yeah, it'll be 12 years in November since I first read a poem on a stage. And it was a nerve-wracking experience. I always say I was like a pneumatic drill holding a piece of paper, because I was just really nervous, and I think I actually hated the first 20 times that I ever read a poem live. Yeah, just because it was just really nerve-wracking, and when you're in a band you can sort of hide behind the music, and let's face it, the sound's normally pretty rubbish at gigs when you're playing the toilet venues, so you know you're not that clear as a vocalist anyway, and there's always like drums, guitar and bass drowning it out. And so it was kind of really getting used to hearing my voice in the flesh, I suppose, like without anything to hide behind. That was a really tough barrier to get over to start with. So I think I'd say to all starting poets that that's a natural thing, you know, so that's something that you have to overcome.
Are they useful though, nerves? Do you find them useful? Because if I ever get nervous doing anything, it's normally because it means something or it's important, or so you can use them in the right way, can't you?
Yeah, I reckon I channel them into sort of just a nervous energy, which adds to the performance. Like a lot of people have said that about me to me, like they do detect there might be nerves there still. I mean, I don't necessarily feel nervous, but it must be there somewhere, because I suppose it comes out through body movements and gestures and that kind of stuff. So in the last 12 years I've been working really, really hard, and I can't express that enough. Work ethic goes a long way. Obviously you can have all the talent in the world, but if you're not going to work hard enough, then you ain't going to get anywhere, and it's as simple as that. And unless you're a bit lucky and can rely on nepotism through the links that you've got, or the existing people you might know in the industry, you're pretty much out there on your own. And particularly being from Derby, Derby doesn't have a recognised face for literature or support organisation for literature. A lot of the existing organisations dabble with literature, but it's not their speciality. So that's another thing that I'm looking at putting together at the moment myself. I've got a community interest company that I'm starting called Wordwise Education CIC, and I intend to change the face of Derby for literature in terms of the up and coming generation and the next generation of writers, because to me it's not right how much you have to struggle in comparison to other cities that have got the infrastructure. So if you look at like Birmingham, Nottingham, London, obviously Manchester, the list could go on. A lot of these places have infrastructure and people already in the city that are invested in literature, and so I want to change that, because I kind of think, it's just not right that people have to struggle. I want to create opportunities for other writers. I want stuff to happen. It's not all about me, and that's been a massive part of what I've done with my poetry, I suppose. I mean, on a personal level, I've got got 2 collections published. So I've got The Best of a Bad Situation, which came out in 2017 through Silhouette Press, who were absolutely brilliant small press to work with, and they were really good to me, treated me really well. And then my second collection, Our Man, came out last year, 2019, on Burning Eye Books, and again they've been brilliant to work with. A bit, they're a bigger press than Silhouette Press, but still, an independent press, and it's, I suppose I can't really emphasise the value of working with that size of a press, because they look after you. You hear sort of horror stories about people getting on bigger publishers, and maybe they get their first ever collection signed to a bigger publisher and it doesn't work out. You do hear these things, similar to the music industry, like you hear about a band getting a record deal, then they get dropped before the album even comes out. There's those kind of things happen in literature as well. I've sort of been making, I've been making a full-time living out of it since 2016, and
So it took you that long from so 8 years of
8 years of nothing.
Nothing to get that.
Yeah, 8 years of absolutely nothing, not being paid a cent for anything. So I think people need to understand that. There's this. I don't know. Don't think social media particularly helps in the way that people are always trying to big up what they're doing, which you have to. By the way, I'm not knocking that, but there seems that everybody's in a rush in this day and age because they want the success, they want to make a living, but I don't fully believe that's possible without sort of doing some graft for free to start with and getting to know what your unique selling point is. Horrible business term, I know, but it's kind of applicable.
I get it a lot with the role I'm in. That you're lucky to get that opportunity, but they don't see the 6 months of going in every Saturday for free and walking to work at 5:30 in the morning when it's pissing down, and you don't see that. They just see you with a BBC badge around your neck and think, oh, look how lucky he is, but you don't just come and knock on the door one day and go, do you want a gig? Exactly. I mean, it's all the unforeseen. It's just the tip of the iceberg, isn't it? Nobody sees what's underneath.
That's it. It's like, when my first poetry collection came out, I think I've been working on it for about. I think one of the poems I've been working on it for about 7 years, something like that. And that's just one poem getting it right, and people don't see that the graft that goes into it. And I think it needs to be understood more, because you can't just have instant success. Everybody would love that. And then again, what is success? That's another word that's kind of like, it depends how you interpret success. So obviously I've had a great few years. I've got to do some amazing things. I've done a lot of good education work. I've had some great commissions. I've done education work obviously in schools, prisons, pupil referral units, even on an excavation site.
Really?
At Bradgate Park.
How does that come about?
Well, it was somebody that I'm connected to in the poetry scene, and she, called Jodie Hannis. She's a great poet herself, but she's also an archaeology student, and she was, kind of interested in the idea of how we can interpret maybe findings from an excavation site through poetry. So that was one thing I never ever thought I'd get to do. I remember watching Time Team when I was younger and all those kind of things, and then next thing you're on an excavation site leading a poetry session.
That's mental.
So you just end up doing some mad stuff. And obviously I won my first award for poetry in 2018. I won the Culture Matters Bread and Roses Award with a musical project I did called Block Capitals. And it was basically for the best spoken word and musical collaboration, and it's an award that's strictly aimed at working class artists. So that was a big one for me, and that really, well, I could call myself an award-winning poet after that. So that was a nice feeling. And then later that year, when Frank Lampard came in for his brief stint at Derby County, good old Frank. The club got in touch with me about doing a poem for Derby County, which is, as a Derby County fan, someone who went to the baseball ground when he was like 4 years old, it was an absolute...
I can imagine. Pinch yourself moment.
Yeah, pinch yourself moment. And I had no idea what they were really going to do with the poem. And then they told me, it's going to get played in the stadium. We're doing a video for it. And I was like, what? That's absolutely mad. So luckily, a lot of the fans have taken to it. There's some fans who haven't taken to it, again, which is fine.
That's football fans.
That's football fans anyway.
Yeah.
But also, what I like about what I've achieved through that is the fact that, it's always been said that only 5% of the population actually claim or admit to engaging with poetry. So when you're reaching a football audience of people who predominantly do not really care about poetry, but they like the poem, you're reaching outside that 5%. And that, to me, is more important than just preaching to the choir, so to speak.
I was going to ask, how much do you think that kick-started your career and got you better known? Because I didn't really know. I knew you from being around Derby, but as a poet, I didn't know you as a poet until We Are Derby. And a lot of people be the same, but then they listen to We Are Derby, know you, and then come across your other work. Is it like a catch-22? You don't really want to be known just for the Derby County poem, but it also helps you with your other stuff.
Yeah, completely. It's completely that. To be fair, I don't really mind being just known as that Derby County poet because
There's worse things you could be known
yeah,
as.
exactly. There's worse things I could be known as, and it's such an honour, to represent the city and the football club that there's no way that I'd ever not want that, if you get what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
But, and it has helped because that's like last year I picked up 2 BBC commissions and a commission for National Poetry Day, and that was off the back of being the working class scallywag poet who goes on a football pitch reading out to thousands of people, and there's not many poets that can say they've done that. No. So I think I have to.
I don't think there'll be one, would they? Has anyone ever done that?
Attila the Stockbroker, who's Brighton's poet in residence, has done it before, but that was at their old ground, which was only a 16,000 capacity. I believe.
Not in your league, mate.
Sorry, Attila. He's a good lad, Attila. So I'm sure if he hears this, he'll take that in good jest. But he's done it loads of times. He's performed in front of a football audience many more times than me. There are many other poets that have done it in the past as well, but maybe not to the extent of
not like 33,000 in front of Forest and Leeds
in
fans
front of Nottingham Forest. So
called every name under the sun.
That's it. Yeah. So as soon as I first did it in December 2018, the club asked me to perform it live on the pitch. It was actually the fans initiated it on Twitter. And I was like, oh yeah, cheers for that. But I knew I couldn't back out of it because you can't turn down an opportunity like that. And I was about 30 seconds into the poem, and they had the biggest. They gave Forest the biggest ticket allocation ever that they have to the away fans, I think, at Pride Park, because it was on Sky, and Sky kind of dictates maybe the attendance of a football match. And so there was like over 3,000 Forest fans shouting "wanker, wanker" as soon as I started the poem. But about 2 minutes in, they sort of gave up because they realised that I wasn't going to lose that battle. There's absolutely no way I was going to get shouted down by a load of Red Dogs. No chance. And luckily, I know the poem that well that I'd like to think I could do it in my sleep. Really,
I think I could do about 75% of it.
You reckon? Yeah. We'll have to test you on that.
Yeah, we'll do it one day.
I think listeners, if you want us to test Mr. Fallows on his ability to deliver my poem, maybe we'll do that one week. It'll be
we'll do that.
Fun. Yeah, we'll go for that. And then last season they asked me back again to do it on the pitch a couple of times. It was first against West Brom, and secondly against Leeds. And then I suppose the big news to drop is that I'll be on the pitch again tomorrow doing it in front of Manchester United.
How are you feeling about that? Is that bigger? Is that bigger than the previous two?
Well, there's no doubting that Manchester United are a bigger club than any of the other clubs I've mentioned. Sorry Leeds fans, sorry Forest fans, sorry West Brom fans, but it's an absolute fact. Manchester United are undoubtedly one of the biggest football clubs, if not the biggest football club in the world. Certainly the biggest English football club in the world. And I don't say that as anybody with any affinity for Man United. Obviously, anybody who knows my We Are Derby poem knows it's got a bit of a dig to Man United fans in it, because at school, everyone in my class was Man United fans, and I'm like, you're from Derby, mate. You shouldn't be supporting Man United. So when Paolo Wanchop did his thing at Old Trafford and embarrassed them, that was the best Monday morning of my life, because it was the one time I could.
Oh yeah, on that Monday morning.
Morning after that Wanchop weekend, driving all those Man United fans completely round the bend.
Brilliant.
Yeah, so we're in on that tomorrow, and I actually get
some
to do
emphasis
it to a Man
on
United fan. Yeah, there'll be real emphasis on the delivery of that line. But yeah, no, I have to be honest. It's like whenever I get asked to do it at Pride Park, there is an initial nervousness that kicks in, like especially when you first get the phone call and you're like, oh my god, I'm doing it again. Like what am I doing? Got all these people, and it's really, it's so much different to doing a normal poetry gig. For starters, you can't really hear what's going on the pitch, because essentially you've just got reverb, and you're probably hearing what you said 3 seconds ago. So you've really got to just go on what you know. And most poetry audiences, you could hear a pin drop. So it's a completely different dynamic, and I genuinely don't think all poets could cope with that environment. Particularly if they were having to read, that'd be even worse. I think it's something you'd have to sort of have memorised the poem to do it.
Yeah, you've got to,
Yeah, because
trying to read and hearing yourself back is almost impossible.
It'd be pretty tough. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. But also, it's good nerves. A bit like what you said. It matters. So it is good nerves, and I think it is kind of a good thing to be nervous about these kind of things. But as soon as I hit the pitch, the adrenaline will kick in and it'll take over.
What's the plan then for tomorrow? Have you been briefed with anything, or do you know what you're doing? What time you're on?
Yeah. Well, they haven't told me what time I'm on. They never do that.
Just keep you waiting.
Just keep me
on you go.
I just get given my time to turn up.
Yeah.
Go and wait near the side of the pitch, and then they'll tell me when I'm on. You know, it's just how it works. It's football, and sometimes it gets changed at the last minute. Anyway, it's like at the Leeds game, I was meant to do it before Steve Bloomer's watching, and then they were like, "Oh no, we're playing Steve Bloomer's watching first, and you're going on just before kickoff." So it depends what's happening.
Yeah.
You know, with the technical side of things, who knows what happened? You know, maybe the DJ bust the lead, or well, no, obviously not, because it was on first. I've no idea why they just changed it at the last minute, but that's just how it goes. You have to be prepared. Yeah, that's it. You just have to be prepared for whatever gets thrown at you, really. Which again is something I can't emphasise enough. You have to be adaptable, and you have to just be prepared to do things that you might not be expecting when you're least expecting it. I always say this about open mic nights, like I started Wordwise poetry event in Derby. I started that in 2016, and I've now passed on the reins to Sophie Sparham for a few months, so she's going to be hosting it. She's a great poet from Derby, obviously. I'm sure a lot of our listeners will know who she is. And one thing that I've always done is just randomly drop it on the audience. So when someone comes and signs up for the open mic, I don't tell people what order they're going on. If someone specifically is very nervous about it and come and asks me, because maybe it's their first time or they just don't cope well with things being dropped on them, then I will obviously let them know and try and make it as comfortable for them as possible. But I genuinely believe that it's good not to know when you're going on, because it gives you just, I don't know, it puts you on the spot, which puts pressure on you, which is a healthy thing in terms of growth as a performer and coping with that kind of thing. So I suppose I'm, and I've quite enjoyed it when I'm, back in the day when I was waiting around to go on an open mic, and people just drop it on you, because you have to just find, you have to find it there, and then you haven't even got time to think. You just have to get up and do it, which I think it's a healthy routine to get in, because let's face it, as a performer, not everything's ideal all the time. Anything could happen. The mic could break. Someone could drop their coffee on the floor, or spill a beer and smash a glass. There's anything that could happen. So I think you have to be prepared for that. But yeah, in long, I could say in short, in long, I'm looking forward to tomorrow, and I'm going to do, I'll obviously do a bit for this podcast.
Yeah, we'll put that on at the end. So if you keep listening till the end of the podcast, we'll
tell you what it was like.
Yeah, we'll have a little bit of an audio diary type thing from Jamie of his time on the pitch and whatnot. But that'll be right at the end. Before that, we've got a dead poet.
Yeah, we do Dead Poets Corner, so we'll get that out of the way. Not that I want to get it out of the way. The poet I've chosen to kick off the show is somebody that, since I've been introduced to his poetry, it's had a profound impact on me. And there's a guy called Barry McSweeney. He was born in Newcastle. He died in 2000. Okay. And this particular poem was actually Poem of the Week in The Guardian on the 24th of February.
Okay.
So that's it. And I had no idea that it was actually, but I've just...
There's poetry in that itself, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's kind of it's kind of like a real coincidence that that's the poet I was choosing to cover, and he's recently had a poem that's been Poem of the Week in The Guardian, posthumously. So I'm really into his work, and so I think I'll just read it.
Yeah.
It's called Daft Patter. If anyone knows about sullen loneliness, you do. Yet there's a grin in the wind, heartless and cold. There's dark in the darkness, beauty of streams. I lower my beams to you from tunnel to tunnel, as if the frozen air had a distinct personality. Standing at the Lonnon Head holding leaks, you sawed my glance in half with yours. What keen eyes. Such strange, outdated clothes, what's inside counts. Leaning into the tall grass grandness of your alert stance towards the west and the brilliant beauties of Ireland. I know now why you took the sickle hook, backing the beasts into their shut-down shed. You chopped the gate for want of sound, but you had sound, all sound, my purr mistress, my fantastic slaver merchant, when we peeled the sky. Together we had water and silence and fire and togetherness, the lights of all you didn't say, not's my life and all dreams. And that's from Wolf Tongue, which is a selected poems 1965 to 2000, which was published by Blood Axe Books in 2003. I believe that it's out of print. So it's kind of, it's one that you'd have to track down on, your Amazon or eBay or whatever. But I'd really recommend it because it's sort of a good collected works, and it's got most of his best work.
And that's Barry Sweeney.
Barry McSweeney.
Yeah, Barry McSweeney. Has he been an influence on your poetry then?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I didn't find him till quite late as a poet. It was only a few years ago that I discovered his work. Again, that thanks to Matthew Clegg for that, because Matthew Clegg, my tutor, is basically a walking encyclopedia of poetry. He's so well read, and he kind of knows what you're going to like. It's like he's never given me a bad recommendation. So
really?
yeah. So I'm very, very blessed and lucky to have people like that around me. And I can't emphasise that enough. Like, you surround yourself with good people who are knowledgeable. It helps you, pick up your own knowledge and develop your own knowledge of poetry.
So how big was Barry McSweeney as a poet? Was he known? Was he fairly famous, or is it more post? He was
well revered.
Really?
Yeah. By the establishment, but not necessarily the most well-known poet or anything. I personally think he should be more well-known because he's absolutely fantastic, and he really had his own style going on.
Yeah.
And a lot of his poetry comes from a place of real darkness, and I suppose I kind of like that in poetry. People might know me from my commissions or maybe the more friendly stuff, but a lot of my poetry is pretty dark as well, and it comes from dark places. So I'm kind of in tune with that as a poet, and I suppose that's what inspires me anyway. Darkness. Sorry everyone to bring the tone down a little bit, but it's the truth. What I always say is be very wary of a happy poet, because I'm not too sure that poets should be too happy.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. If you got a smiley poet, I'd wonder honestly.
Are they the cat sat in a hat on a mat kind of poets? Or
I'm not going to go against that because at the end of the day, that's sort of like how the kids start with poetry and all this rhyming stuff, and I'm into that as well. Because I'm into anything that inspires kids getting into poetry. But yeah, I mean, you still get adults doing it. Let's face it, which is fine. I'm not going to turn my nose up at any poetry, But obviously, we've all got our own preferences, and we're dealing with what is a subjective art form. It's not a science experiment. It's not objective truth in terms of poetry. But I perhaps don't engage too much with happy poetry, if I'm being honest with you. And I always sort of question, if a poet's that happy, what struggle have they had?
Yeah.
I'm
what's influencing them?
Yeah, what's influencing? What kind of life have you had if you're that happy?
Yeah. I look forward to hearing a few more. I'm going to be like an encyclopedia of dead poets by the end of this.
Yeah, you will do. By the time I finish with you, you definitely will.
I'll be reading them off.
Yeah. So I suppose it wouldn't be right if I don't do one of my own poems as well. So I was going to read one of my own poems every episode.
It's your podcast, mate.
Yeah, I'll do what I want, mate. It's my podcast.
I'm just here to make sure the microphones are working and all that, mate. You crack on.
Keep me going. That's it. Keep the conversation rolling. And obviously we've got an interview with Paul Handley from Bearded Badger Press yet to come up as well, and we've got the post match or the post poetry treatment of Man United, which
you've got the Man United, which is gonna be, it's weird, isn't it? By the time we listen back, you'd have done it. It's
kind of weird, and I was saying this to my dad the other day. There's only 2 footballers I've ever mentioned in my poems, right? And one of them was a poem I wrote back in about, I think it was about 2008, 2009, and I mentioned something about Ashley Cole.
Okay.
So Ashley Cole ends up coming and playing for Derby County last season.
Yeah.
In my collection, Our Man, that came out last year, one of the poems I originally wrote for the collection was while I was working on a project in Stoke, and I referenced the moment that Phil Bardsley sparked out Wayne Rooney in that famous video that went viral, and lo and behold, so actually no, it's 3 poets I mentioned, but so we've not got Phil Bardsley yet, but we have got Wayne Rooney. So it's kind of like I feel like I should just keep mentioning footballers.
We do a poem about Messi or something.
That's what I was thinking. I may as well do a poem about Messi, let's get Ronaldo in there. Let's have a few more, and then hopefully they might rock up at Derby eventually. So it's a bit of a theme going on. But I'm going to So in terms of my own poem, I'm going to do this one that was it was actually on BBC Radio 4 last year, which was hilarious, to be honest, because we were listening to the show that was on before the show that ours was on, and it was hosted by Sabrina Mahfouz, who's a brilliant poet from London. But the show that was on before was like, oh yes, it's a typical BBC accent. And I was just sat there listening to it with my old man, and my old man was like, are you really going to be on this radio station in a minute? I was like, yeah, you're going to hear my scallywag tones in a minute. So this one's called Someone's Left Behind a Sovereign Ring, and it goes like this. I see you and you see me, but there are black spots in the corner to the left of the pool table opposite the dartboard, or in that seat by the window, the one in which Stevie glassed that Cockney youth right after he said, I actually liked Thatcher, or matter of factly, good old Stevie saw to him mind. Obviously there's the bogs as well. Both cubicles are guaranteed occupied on a weekend night. The tiles still caked in tar from before the smoking ban. Toilet tops littered with nefarious substances. Fast catching, someone's even left behind a sovereign ring. Back at the bar, Murdoch news reading Muppets are rendered defeated and drank out for the day. The monitor behind the bar details every word of crimes that pay. Every utterance of knocked off meat, deli cheese, HD tellies and games consoles chilled and cheap with no guarantee. Stevie turns round to Bob the barman and says, turn the fucking jukebox up. We can hear ourselves talk.
I've never heard that one before.
Yeah, there you go. It's going to be an education for you as well, because I've
heard a lot of your stuff, but I've never heard that.
You've mainly heard the stuff that Radio Derby get me to do, which obviously has to be more radio friendly.
Yeah,
I have to be honest. In that version that went out on BBC 4, the production company did ask me if I'd censor the word fucking because they'd already had quite some really strong words.
Oh, okay.
So I changed it to blooming. Turn the blooming jukebox up.
Oh, okay.
But I don't mind making a compromise. I thought I'd help them out. It's nice of me, and to be honest, it was kind of funny, innit?
Yeah.
To do something like that.
Yeah. So guest, you tell us a bit about the guest?
Yeah. No, do you know what? I'm not going to tell you a bit about the guest. I'm going to let him do it because I don't want to get things wrong.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, I've never met Paul before.
Really?
No, but I'm aware of his work, and I really like what he's doing for the community, and his enthusiasm for what he's doing. And to start a press is not an easy job. There's so much involved, and I've heard. What did I do? I wrote a foreword for an anthology last year, and he had a poem in that, which was brilliant. So I know he's a very skilled writer in it, in himself, but I really just admire the fact that he's going to be the poetry and literature press for Derby at the minute, and obviously I really want to support that, and everyone knows how mad I am about my city, so I just think it's really important to get him on and to support that. So obviously he's arriving soon, so we'll get the interview done with him, and he can I've got some questions to fire at him, and then we'll let him do the talking.
Let him do the talking. Yeah. What a plan.
He deserves the exposure at the end of the day.
Certainly.
So, and I hope that our listeners will support his press and, buy the books that he puts out, because it's vitally important. This guy's it's an independent venture. He's not backed by anyone. He hasn't got Arts Council funding. He's doing it all off his own back, and hats off to that. That's awesome. So I'm still here in the Seven Stars, and I've just been joined by Paul Hanley from Bearded Badger Publishing. I said at the start that I don't know much about Paul. I don't know much about his journey, so this is much me finding out about him as well. And I just wanted to shed light on what he's doing, because publishing is a really hard industry, and I just massively admire the fact that he's taking it on, and he's going to be the publisher in Derby and Derbyshire, and I think that's something we should be proud of. So yeah, Paul, introduce yourselves to tell us about yourself, your backstory, what got you here.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me on first.
No problem.
as you probably tell from the accent, I'm not a Derby local lad. I'm from the West Midlands, from the Black Country. So I've been in and around Derbyshire now for about 10 years. Started out work like a lot of people that come here, working for Rolls-Royce, and then about 3 years ago decided, it's a bit of a deep story, lost both my parents, and decided to do something different in life, you know what I mean, and went back to university, got myself a degree in English, and then following on from that, I was sort of, well, I don't really know what I'm going to do now. But what I did learn over that period was that I had a real love for books, and in all shapes and forms, and that's what kind of got me down the publishing route, and enrolled to do an MA, Masters in Publishing, and at the same time I'm launching a company, as you say, Bearded Badger Publishing Company. So it's not a university project, but what it does give me is the benefit of being able to tap into university resources. The lecturing team there have all got absolutely fantastic experience in the industry, so it's like having a team of people there when really, you know, on tap for using for those resource things, and obviously the other things that come with, you know, being a student at the university. So yeah, off the back of that, we've launched Bearded Badger Publishing earlier this year. We're going to do 2 main imprints, if you like, within that. One of them is called A Poet in Your Pocket, which is going to be a series of chapbooks, sort of, you know, short but good quality. You know, they're not pamphlets. They're going to be good quality chapbooks, each dedicated to a single poet. All East Midlands based to start with. We're, you know, that's like you were saying, there's a gap here somewhere, and you know, there's no publisher in Derby or Derbyshire, none that I know of, and it's about trying to just give people a leg up, if you like, get some work out there. Let's get it in tangible form. Loads of good poetry nights that go on all around the region. So it's about trying to take that and put it into some sort of on the page, if you like. And then following that, we're going to do a range called Easter Centre, which again, as the title suggests, it's going to be focused around East Midlands-based writers, and we're going to put out a series of, well, it could be anything, contemporary fiction, it could be something that's non-fiction, but the key thing is it's, you know, these writers there's a link there to the East Midlands.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I'm loving the sound of it already, particularly with the emphasis on the East Midlands. We are, you know, one of the most overlooked sort of regions in the whole of the UK, and yeah, so yeah, thank you for taking it on as well, because, you know, it's, like I say, it's something that's always been part of my plans to in terms of developing the literature community, particularly for Derby and Derbyshire. So yeah, thanks for saving me the work, because I know nothing about publishing, so to speak. And it's you know, it's a really difficult industry, and I really admire what you're taking on, and yeah, that sounds like an absolutely fantastic.
I mean, it is a tough industry. I'm under no illusion. Very London centric, and you know, you've got this whole north south divide that you've seen politically, and we kind of get squashed, I think, here in the middle. And actually, we have our own identity, and I think, you know, the East Midlands is different even to the West Midlands, where I'm from, you know, and not just in terms of dialect, but just in terms of culture and that sort of thing. And I think, you know, we've got to sort of widen that gap so that there is a north, there is a south, but then there's this bit in the middle, and that's the bit that we want to shout about a little bit here. You know, that's what we're trying to do with the stuff that we're putting out.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I'm loving the fact that this is a press that is committed to the East Midlands first and foremost. So I suppose you may have answered the question already, but what really inspired you to start a press?
I think, as I say, it was it's a love of books first and foremost. But I mean, that's probably a bit of a cliched answer. But it was well, what can I do? What skill set have I got? And my background is in mainly operations management, project management. So it's about, well, can I take that? Can I bolt it onto something that I'm learning? And you know, what gives me then the best chance of having a success? And I think publishing is absolutely that, because it requires all of those things, the project management, you know, like the typesetting side of it, managing that, the editorial side of it, and then you've got the print management, then you've got the marketing, the distribution. So there's all these different things that you need to manage, and I think, you know, that fits my skill set particularly well, and it's a passion, you know, it's something that there can't be anything better. I mean, you'd know, you've done it. What can't be anything better than getting your book out there in the flesh, you know, in that tangible form.
Yeah. to be fair, it's you know, I'm lucky to have had 2 collections published now, and the sense of pride you get when you get that back from the publisher, and you're like, wow, this Word document or PDF or whatever is now an actual living, breathing thing, so to speak. And I think that's you know, it sounds like you know, already really well equipped with all the what you know, what are essentially transferable skills. And I think maybe where in the past when I've spoke to certain publishers that they're perhaps not been equipped, but they've still managed to do something. So I think the fact that you've got all these skills from your previous work experience and you've transferred them, that's you know, that's really impressive that you've noticed that you've got what it takes, so to speak.
Well, I hope so. As I say, I'm still learning. As I say, I'm really trying to tap into all the knowledge that the lecturing team at the university have got. My other classmates as well, they're really great for like sort of using the soundboards, bouncing ideas off, and you know, everybody has. I think you can get a bit sort of tunnel visioned in what you like as a reader, and as a publisher, you really can't be like that. You've got to take a step back and have a look at, you know, and that's one of the other things that we want to be that open and inclusive sort of publishing house. That's you know, it don't matter, you know, where you come from or what your background is. It's about what you put on the page, and that, do you know what I mean? And that's that's really important to me, and getting that out there rather than thinking about it first and foremost in a commercial sense. Yeah, you know, it's let's support people and let's do something here in Derby.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I mean, there is, I suppose, with certain publishing houses that there might be too much of an emphasis on what they like, which obviously you know, you have to believe in what you're putting out. But you know, I've said earlier in the episode that what we're dealing with here is a subjective art form. It's not, you know, it's not an objective science experiment or anything like that. So I think sometimes it's like recognising that a writer deserves the support. Absolutely. And that you can provide that. And I think that's a really, really refreshing outlook.
I think that's one of the things as well I took from doing the degree, was that I read books that I would never ever have picked off the shelf. You know what I mean? And reading these sort of this variety of books sort of opens you up to stuff that actually, you know what, maybe my taste isn't as sort of narrow as I first thought it was. Yeah. And I think sometimes you do have to do that, don't you? You step back and say, well, let's read something new, let's listen to something new, let's look at something new, and sometimes it surprises you, I think, you know. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, certainly from, you know, doing my own degree, and then I'm doing my MA at Birmingham in creative writing, and I've been exposed to stuff that I never thought I would have even known to search for it. Yeah. So you got all this knowledge that's being passed on to you, you know, via lecturers, and I think that's a really, you know, important point that you make is what you gain from the lecturers as well. And I know myself from doing my undergrad at Derby that, you know, the team there are brilliant. And I think we're actually really lucky to have them. You know, a lot of universities, they don't have the level of support that the tutors at Derby give you.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I mean, I can only speak for myself because that's the only person that's here. But I think all the cohort that I'm with at the moment would absolutely back you on that one. That, you know, that the support you get, it's on a practical level as well. It's not just on an academic level. So you know, it's that practical. They've got years of experience in the industry, and all in different things like marketing, some in editorial. And these are all skills that, you know, if you're going to set out as an indie publisher, small press like I am, you've got to be able to sort of manage these different facets of the business. So being able to tap into that resource is absolutely, you know, invaluable to me.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant, you know, and obviously I'm always singing the song for Derby Uni because they essentially changed my life. You know, do you get that? Is that how you feel about what, you know, going on to first do the English degree and then now being on the MA? Do you feel that sense of, wow, this is like kind of really changed my life?
Absolutely. I mean, obviously the listeners won't be able to see, but I'm nearer 50 than 40. You know, so I'm sort of, let's just say, experienced in my years. And so I was a mature student, and I think that going into that environment, I just feel so privileged, you know, that I can do that, and I absolutely love it in many ways. I mean, obviously I finished the MA this summer. Yeah. It's going to be a big sort of piece of my life that's kind
Yeah,
of done. And
what do I do now
Yeah,
kind
you
of
know, it's been a
feeling.
long time since I left school and had that feeling of,
Yeah.
you know, moving on from a group of friends. And obviously being probably twice the age of pretty much everybody else in the class, it's going to be really interesting seeing what the others do and go off and doing their careers in publishing, you know, as well. So, yeah, it's you know, I think it's, again, the universities, I know it's on the edge of the city, but I feel now it's starting to get a bit more, it's becoming more of a university city now, Derby, as compared to, say, 10 years ago when it was difficult to know. Do you know what I mean? And I think that can only be good for the city and only be good for retaining talent.
Yeah,
You
definitely.
know, that comes through the university system and the college systems
Yeah.
within the city rather than, you know, learning and then going somewhere else.
Yeah, completely. And I think that's a really important thing to discuss in terms of how do we retain talent, because predominantly in Derby we've had a problem with it over the years, and it's something part of the strand of what I'm working on with the community interest company is going to be focused around how do we retain talent that comes to the city and then graduates, so to speak, whether that's at undergrad level or MA level or PhD level. How do we get them to stick around and be involved in the community? And I certainly see part of what you're doing and what your focus is will be a huge part of that. You know,
Well,
and I think it's really important.
That's important to me as well. Is that sort of sense of belonging to the community and working with the community. I don't just want to be this publishing house that's behind closed doors that's putting out books. It's about getting involved in the community. So we're doing things like pop-up bookshops. We're going to do some events.
Yeah,
you
brilliant.
know, getting involved in some of the other stuff that goes on. Maybe try and get a bit more involved with the Derby Book Festival and other things like that. You know, so it's not just going to be a little publishing company in the corner that puts out 2 or 3 books a year. I really want to get involved in the community, and there's some great stuff going on in the city.
Yeah.
You know, some, like we're saying, some great poetry nights. You've got places like Quad Data that are doing really good stuff.
Yeah.
Dubrek.
That's where you are tomorrow doing a pop-up.
That's right, yeah. So, you know, these sort of places, I think we've got to kind of work in a collaborative fashion rather than in silos.
Yeah,
and I think that
definitely.
can only be good for lifting the whole, you know, the cultural essence of the city, I think. Sounds a bit
Brilliant.
deep, but
Brilliant. That's, like I say, I think that's really, really important. But what really strikes me about yourself is that although obviously you're on an MA in publishing, you're actually being really proactive outside of the MA. Like how important do you think that is? Because in terms of my own development as a writer, I obviously am not a publisher, but I was very proactive in terms of what I did outside of my degree. And for me, it's sometimes I find it frustrating that I don't see every student doing that. I know a lot of students do that, but there's plenty of students who sort of don't do that. Like, what would your advice be around that?
It's I know I say this with the benefit of age and experience. You know, it's just such an opportunity, isn't it? You know, if you're doing your degree, it's 3 years, and MA's another year on the end of that. I would say go out, grasp whatever you can. You know what I mean? Grasp whatever you can, get involved in whatever you can. And, you know, there is a lot of, like I say, a lot of good stuff going on in Derby culturally. You might have to search a little bit more than you would perhaps if you were in Birmingham, Manchester, so on.
Yeah.
But it's there, and I think my advice would be grasp whatever you can, because time moves faster, doesn't it? It doesn't stand still. And,
Definitely.
you know, you've got to grasp whatever you can and move with the times. And that would be my advice. You know, I look back, it's took me till I was in my mid-40s to sort of do this. You know, don't do that. I'm not saying don't do that, but, you know,
Don't wait.
the guys that are doing it in their early 20s and what have you, late teens, just go out and see what you can do. Make a difference. That's one. Make a difference, because the difference will be you. You know?
Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah, and I'd just like to say to our listeners, anyone who is, you know, starting a career in creative writing, whether that be as a fiction writer, as a poet, as a publisher, an events organizer, whatever, like I can't stress the importance of participation. So it's going out there and getting involved with what's already on and collaborating with other people, and not just shutting yourself off and having this sort of view that everything's a competition.
Well, I think that's the danger, isn't it? That you know, people can perceive, you know, if you're a poet, I'm a poet, we're in competition or things like that. But it doesn't have to be that way, does it? We can help each other out. We can, you know, and I think that sense of collaboration is definitely what's going to make the change. I think.
Yeah, Oh, that's brilliant. Yeah, but it's been really great having you on. I've got like one more sort of question to ask you just to wrap this up. Yeah. And obviously you've spoke so openly about what you want to do for other writers, but I know that you're a very talented writer yourself. So I have to ask the question: what are your plans for your own writing? Have you got anything in the pipeline? Is there anything you're working on?
I've done bits of poetry. We were talking a bit earlier about some stuff that we've been doing around. It was around the loss of my parents, and I use poetry a lot to help me deal with some of those things.
Yeah.
That aren't the easiest thing to talk about at times.
Yeah,
and I know I'm not alone in doing that. But yeah, I still write. I still have ambitions to write.
Yeah,
I've kind of parked them a little bit to one side in the sense that it's more about helping other people get published at the moment. But that doesn't mean I know I always come back to it, and things like doing the little haiku poems. The sort of 17-syllable stuff. Dead easy to do when you're sat there in a cafe observing and what have you. And I still do stuff like that. And I know one day I'm going to pick this book up that I jot all these down in and start doing something with that. And,
brilliant.
Yeah, so hopefully carry on doing that at some point. Definitely.
Oh, that's brilliant. Yeah. I suppose in a way I just hope that you don't forget about your own writing as well, because we have a tendency to do that when we're so engaged in helping others with their writing. It's like a danger that we can fall into a trap and forget about our own stuff. And I think it's really hard to strike the balance, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And as I say, focus at the minute is publishing, but I know there will come a time where, you've got, I think that creative outlet, if you like, just comes bubbling to the top again, doesn't it? And it might be because you're frustrated with something that's happening politically or environmental or whatever. And before you know it, you're jotting away and and there's so many ways of sharing that now, isn't there, as well, before even you get to the stage of being published. So,
definitely.
Social media and poetry nights, open mic nights, things like that. So, yeah, absolutely. One day I'll pick the pen up again, mate.
Yeah, Brill. Well, I'll look forward to hearing it, and obviously I'll be keeping in touch with you, and we've already spoke about collaborating on certain projects and keeping involved with each other. Just want to thank you again for coming down and taking the time to talk to us.
That's no problem.
And all the best with your future ambitions and everything. Do you want to just give a little plug as to how to follow you on social media and all that kind of stuff?
So I'm on all the major platforms: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Bearded Badger Publishing. There ain't that many Bearded Badgers out there. It's relatively easy to get hold of. We've got a website as well, beardedbadgerpublishing.com. So again, we take a look at that. We'll get stuff out there. As I say, we're open for submissions at the minute for both the poetry and the Easter Centre range.
Oh, good stuff.
The response has been good, but the more we get, the better. And let's see if we can get some good stuff out there to fly the Derby flag, the East Midlands flag.
Yeah, so that's officially a shout out to East Midlands and Derby poets to get submitting, right?
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely. Get it in, and let's create something.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks a lot, Paul. It's been great speaking to you.
And you, mate. Thanks, mate.
All the best. Thanks a lot. Cheers.
We are Derby, rail track city, birthplace of the Industrial Revolution, where inventors span cogs to engineer solutions. We're a city that delivers, from Royal Mail PO boxes to Royal Crown Derby China. Craft and specialism's our definer. We are Derby, bearers of Joseph Strutt's philanthropy, Erasmus Darwin's philosophy, where Florence Nightingale hatched plans to revolutionise the healthcare of England. We're engineers with dirty fingernails, grafting scrap put through our veins. We're Rolls-Royce engines, Vulcan nails, Toyota motors, bombarding trains. We are Derby. A picture painted by Wright, a building designed by Pickford. We're artistic souls and working minds with a heritage built on cognizance. The underdog city of Middle England, entrepreneurship exemplified, where independent businesses thrive. The real ale capital, a beer festival every night. We are Derby, where the ram is our symbol. The city is beating hard. We've lived through hard times, persevered. Our flag signals will find the start. We are Derby County, formed in 1884, 100 years before I was born. On bridge they forged. Their legacy still remains where on Shaftesbury Crest the kids now play, where Haas is standing, Turnbull stand on the ashes of our baseball ground. They laugh and have a kick around. The Stevie Bloomer watches down. The city's proud and makes it proud. We are Derby on that Monday morning after that one-shot weekend, driving all those Man United fans completely around the bend. We're resilient to the flesh. We've never settled for second best. Just walk these streets, you'll feel the pride. It's in our DNA. We are Derby, where the future's bright, bright black and white. Whoever the opponent, we'll take the fight. We'll sing the songs, we'll sing them loud. Whatever gets thrown at us, the ambition's here. The time is now. Our loyal supporters will see us proud with our new blood. We can make the push and forge new histories to elevate this club back to the top, where we belong. The ambition here is bubbling strong. We are Derby. Derby County.
All right, so Southern Soda on the Friday following your big day yesterday. First things first, Jamie Frazavulu, working class hero, is drinking Whale Mist with Collective Arts. It's a silver can with like a teal label on it with baseballs. It's cost you about £6. It looks like strawberry milkshake. You've changed.
Mate, your palate changes when you get older. It's a sours, an IPA sours. All right.
It's not for me, mate.
Mate, it doesn't have to be for you, does it? I'm going to enjoy it. I'm sort of celebrating now that I've got the hard work out the way of last night.
How was it?
In all honesty, the toughest assignment I've ever had as a poet. Putting up with 3,000 Nottingham Forest fans is one thing, and by the way, they were loud. I'm not dissing the Forest fans on that one. They were loud when I did the poem. But 6,000 Man United fans is a whole new level. It's a different kettle of fish completely. First of all, hats off to the Man United fans, because they did very nearly put me off my game on a couple of occasions. I nearly dropped the mic, stumbled a little bit over a few words, but no one seems to have noticed too much. So I think I've done the job. I'm proud that I've done it. But geez, I'll be totally honest with you, I'm bloody glad it's over.
They're different gravy, aren't they? They're Man United fans. I put it on Facebook last night. The one thing I took away from the game yesterday was like, how good are they? Like they've come to Derby, nothing to them, are they? But they've come to Derby away on a Thursday night, 6,000, and literally sang for 90 minutes. Yeah,
more than 90 minutes, because they were singing they were singing loud and proud way before kick-off. So, yeah, no, hats off to him. I've obviously, as a poet, I've certainly never played to an audience like that. I felt like I'd really been thrown into the cauldron. So, yeah, hats off to him. But, it was a proud moment for me, obviously, because, like I said at the start of the podcast, Man United, easily, the biggest British team in the world, if not the biggest team in the world, in terms of their following and fan base. And, yeah, you just, mate, I can't help but the football fan in me, take care, is always going to love it, always going to love it. Here, it was kind of like I was halfway in between doing the poem, but also just admiring the noise from their crowd. I love to hear a football crowd just giving it some. So yeah, it was a unbelievable experience, and obviously walking out onto the pitch with Aljoša Asanovic, an absolute Derby County legend. That was a bit of a moment, and I got to speak to him for a bit and have a quick photo with him. Got to shake hands with Wayne Rooney and Chrissy Martin as usual. Chrissy Martin's always a good lad. But yeah, no, it was a surreal night, to say the least. Shame about the result, but I'll be honest, because I had a job to do, I didn't really put too much focus on the result. I wanted us to win, but I didn't have too high expectations. It was kind of nice to go to a Derby game that's not in the league and not have that pressure, in terms of that side of it. But yeah, absolutely, it was brilliant. But I'm not going to lie, it was really tough, really hard work.
We've done it in podcast. It's been mad, isn't it?
Yeah, completely. Yeah. I'm. That's why I bought this posh beer to celebrate, Blake.
Is that what it is?
Yeah. Don't start dissing me over my taste in beers, mate. I like a sour IPA. Sorry, your palate changes as you get older. You've just been with me. I just had a pint of Bass somewhere else in the Tiger. So,
Yeah, but I can't take the piss out of you for that, can I? So
No, definitely not. No. So yeah, this is us signing off officially anyway, and thanks for listening in. We'll be rolling with episode 2 next month, and cheers for your hard work as well, Blake. All the best. Let's clink on that one.
yeah.